It looks like today we're dealing with an interesting problem. This salamander is not running. This thing will buzz in a minute, but that fan won't move. Yeah, it's kicked down. Okay, it is buzzing. It's, I don't know why it's not buzzing at low temperature. Maybe it's just this thing isn't turning on at low temperature because it's been turned on a couple of times. That's my guess. But we crank it over to top or high temperature. This thing is buzzing, and that fan is just barely wanting to move. So what I'm going to do is take that fan apart and try to clean it out. My hope is that that's the problem. I don't want to run it too long. Running a fan like that, when it's I don't know necessarily what the damage would be from it, but I know that it can't be good. You know, you're browning out the circuits, and that's not good. But I'm gonna take that fan apart, and I'm just gonna show you as I go. The front of this motor is clean. I'm not gonna take this off all the way. There's no holes in the front of this casing. Nothing, absolutely no holes. And you may not be able to see it very well, but I can see the windings. There's that thing is clean. That thing is super clean. So it's obviously probably not the front of the motor. I'm hoping it's the back of the motor. I'm expecting that it's this little square box down here, which I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's a capacitor. And if that's a capacitor and it's gone bad, that would obviously be why this fan could turn. I have to make absolute sure. Yes, it is connected into that fan. It shows a capacitor on the diagram I found randomly. And, you know, it's there at the very end there. You can see that circle that right there. That's a capacitor. It's a 30 UF capacitor at 250 volts going to a pump motor. This is apparently a pump motor. I didn't even think about it at first, but yeah, it's a pump motor. Not only is a fan, but it also is a pump. I mean, that's why this whole back area exists. So I've disconnected the back side of this pump, and there's only a couple holes here. You can see that hole. It's right. You can't see it now. You can see it. Yeah, that hole, and there's another hole. When I spin this motor, yeah, you're not gonna be able to see, but when I spin this motor, if there's any dirt in there, it's really tried really hard to get in there, and I'm not seeing any kind of possibility of dirt in there. So I'm not for sure if it's even worth taking the back of this off. I still might. I probably will. I don't really want to, but I probably will just to check. The bigger interesting thing to me, and I don't think this is actually an issue for this, but it is an issue. That line is cracked, and more cracked. I mean, you can tell right there, near the end. Yeah, that's not just a crack, that's open. I don't think that stops this motor from running. I'm not 100% sure what that does. It looks like some kind of airline is what we've got going on here. So I don't think that's what's stopping this. But yeah, we're just going to keep cracking on. Probably going to look into a capacitor. I would appear to be one step closer. Don't you know, be careful with if you do something like this, or if you do it this way, because there's these pieces in here. You see those little slots in there? Those are pieces in there. I just wanted, I'm you know, I'm just kind of testing it out as I go, kind of stuff, and if I turn it on, you'll see in a second, as soon as it kicks in, it should spin with ease. I'm going to turn it right off just exactly, you know, as fast as I turn it on. So apparently, it was stuck back here. Because all I did was remove this cover. That's all I did, and now it's spinning with ease. So, I'm going to put this cover back on, and hopefully, it'll spin just as easy. It's kind of odd. That thing is actually off center. But clearly that's how it's supposed to be. I mean, it's bolted in place. I mean, you can barely see that bolt up there. But, yeah, I mean, it's spinning good. So I'm hoping that I put that cover back on, you know, wipe off any junk on there. Hopefully I get the same, you know, hopefully it just starts up like that. We're going to see if this thing turns off. We're going to see if it builds pressure. Okay, still turns off. Also, I didn't notice any change in the pressure gauge. The hope is that it's that rubber line. Okay, I popped the side panel off to see where this line goes for sure. I wasn't 100% sure that it went to the front of this thing, but it clearly does. It goes right up here where these two lines are. It's one of those lines. And it goes to the back there, obviously. And it's housed under here so that the fan has room. I also had to pop this circuit board off. If you know, when you pop it off, be gentle. Circuit boards can break, and you don't want these things to break on you. Okay, here's where we are. We're getting about a 3 on the pressure gauge. It's still turning off. I imagine a 3 is good. It only goes up to 14, so 3 sounds okay. The one thing I did notice is that one time while messing with it, it spurt and threw out a flame, like it normally does, except it just stopped after it. At first I thought the thing was empty because I looked at the gauge and it says empty. But I just threw a bunch more in it, and that gauge didn't move at all. So I questioned that. I also noticed that there's some residue here on that line. That's our fuel line. That's gas. That line's actually a little cracked. I don't think that's necessarily stopping it from getting in. It's definitely a line that will need to be, changed out eventually. My thought is maybe the igniter. Maybe there's some crud in the igniter or somewhere in this section. I know I'm getting spark. I can see spark when I started up and everything. I took it off using 3 bolts just here in the back. It was a little bit of a pain leaving this on. I actually ended up bending the fan blade a little bit so I could do it. I mean, I know the fuel line's cracked a little bit at the top there. I don't think that's the issue. You know, it's one of those things, it's a bad fuel line, but I also don't think it's that bad of a fuel line. And so I'm trying to, rule around it first, because I probably don't have a fuel line to replace it with anyway. Fuel lines aren't that expensive, but I don't have one tonight, and it's like midnight, so that ain't happening right now. But, we're going to pop that apart and see what's up. Here's the part. This is what comes out when you take it out. It was a 16 millimeter. Luckily, don't worry about that spring. Apparently, this isn't like spring loaded or anything. That was my biggest concern. I had to clamp it on this side and use that 16 again because, as you'll see in a second, this comes apart. Do be careful. There's a small piece in here, and I actually just dropped it, as you'll notice. This piece. Right there. You see how it's got that grooves? I've already looked at this. The grooves this will sit right on like how it's sitting right now. And that'll sit right in the top of this. You want those grooves facing towards the nozzle. In order to get that nozzle off, I personally took the igniter off. There's one screw here. That's where your igniter goes through. Let's give it a second. We're in operational mode. Now, to be strictly honest, I don't think it was clogged. I was looking at it after I was putting it together, and this line isn't split or cracked. It's split. I mean, it's straight up split. I do have one issue that I will have to address later as well. I need to change this line out, and just with how brittle it is and everything, I accidentally broke the end of this. It's a fuel filter, so there isn't much of that end left. It'll sit there, but that's something that if I can't change it right now, which it seems like I'm not going to be able to, there's enough of an in there that I can at least put it. I'll take it off and show you. I mean, there's enough of it in there. There's a nub there that that sat on. So, I mean, it'll do for now. But yeah, we're good. We're good. I'm happy. I'm surprised, to be honest. This isn't how I expected a good portion of my day to go. And I definitely didn't expect to get this thing running. But, hey, sometimes stuff works out. As a little wrap up, I just kind of wanted to say, I'll leave a little, thank you to the people that came before me. My family, the history that I'm aware of. They weren't, as far as I'm aware, as far back as I know, none of my family has ever been rich. In fact, a lot of them, were pretty poor. And they, used what they had. They fixed it. They made it better. They turned it into something else. That's how they were. That's how my dad is. That's how my grandfather was. And as far as I'm aware, it goes even further back than that. And it's, that got instilled in me at an early age. That fixing things, learning how things work, you could do a lot with it. I mean, at an early age, I was tearing stuff apart because it was junk. And it was, scrap metal. And it was just fun to tear it apart. And that's how I started. My dad would make some, would work on some truck. And I'd tear apart some old washing machine, And that's how it kind of went. So I got to see him build things. And I got to learn how things worked by tearing them apart. Stuff that never, was never going to ever work again. Because if I didn't tear it apart, it was just going to the scrap yard anyway. And so I just, I wanted to say that, that history, it goes back to even the stories I've heard from my father, about stuff that my grandfather has done. I mean, I know my grandfather has done things. I haven't seen him do as much, personally. But that history, it continues with me. And, even though they still exist and can still make things, it's my time to try to make a little bit more and show that I can do it as well.